Car forums. What was once the primary option for your average car enthusiast's only means of reaching the wider car community has been lost to time. Many forums remain completely barren, with broken links and empty photo buckets. Although some communities are still active to this day, most have fallen to the wayside and remain almost completely abandoned. Only kept barely alive as a resource for finding answers to niche issues. But what are these forums like to venture through nowadays? I was never a forum person. I grew up in the weird middle ground between dying print media and poor online content. Although many forums were still alive and kicking back then, I was also a brainlet of a kid, so outside of my monthly modified magazine subscription, the only time I spent reading was limited to the occasional text box in Pokemon. Not to mention that online content back then was far from what we have today. Car videos were pretty much just limited to early Mighty Car mods and your occasional boomer speed channel video. Not to mention, Instagram was still filled with the same reposted garbage and lacked a lot of the search and discovery features we have today. So most people were on forums to talk to people and learn new information. In recent times, I've been sort of faux nostalgic for this era, and I wanted to see what I really missed out on. The forum I ended up going with was DoriKaze. A lot of the old head Corolla guys I've talked to have offhandedly brought it up, as at one point, this would have been the go-to spot for someone like me. It was a dedicated old Toyota forum for people in Canada. Started around 2004 and peaking at just over 6,000 members and 500,000 posts. In modern times, it's pretty much reduced to almost nothing. 2 of the 3 total recent posts are just a guy asking if anyone's still around and another talking about their hatred for Facebook groups. So needless to say, it's more or less abandoned. For my limited knowledge, this kind of just seems like your regular old forum. In all likelihood, it was probably put together by one or maybe a handful of people. Most forums of this era were relatively easy to make, as they used a proprietary software. This one, for example, used vBulletin. Although they were a little restrictive, making most of them look drab and boring, it definitely stopped the Technicolor nonsense of the early 2000s. After poking around for a little bit, I pretty much instantly gravitated towards the Reader's Ride section. This one was always one of my more favorites as a kid, as I enjoyed the more relatable cars. This ended up making me go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, poking through basically every single post that piqued my interest. Eventually I started poking around a little bit more and I stumbled on the tech reference section. This kind of surprised me as it was pretty much just 5 pages of nothing but information. Nothing else. Just how-tos, part numbers, and general info. Though I think one of my favorites was the event section. Its main purpose seemed to be organizing meets and events in a time without social media. But if you go all the way back, this leads to some interesting stuff. Who could forget such classics as,
"I have an urge for beer again. Anyone up for it?"
People legitimately use this for asking strangers to hang out. Truly a different era. I eventually found myself back at the Reader's Ride section. Besides crying every time I saw what someone paid for a GTS hatch, it was definitely interesting seeing how these cars were built a decade ago. I was quite honestly expecting a lot more junk, considering what these cars were in the eyes of most people. Outside of first generation Celicas, SW20s, and Supras, most Toyotas were just kind of considered shitty little cars by your average person. But to my surprise, there was a lot of quality stuff. Although most were definitely budget builds, there was a healthy mix of simple but high quality stuff, and it was pretty cool seeing what people put together in their garage during their free time. A real standout would be how well pretty much every single car stood the test of time. Although some would be pretty meta for our current day and age, they were mostly all relatively simplistic, but interesting nevertheless, typically focusing more on performance rather than looks. Take this kooky 8.6 coupe for example. Nothing particularly flashy, just seemed like a pretty simple, well sorted out car. Or this 85 hatch. I don't need to begin to explain why I like this car so much. It may be fun, but it's definitely a little bit of an annoyance looking through these older threads. A lot of times they'll add good information as a link to some other site or forum that's been long gone. Or every photo in the thread will be missing or broken. I'm guessing most of this was still when there wasn't many good free options for photo sharing by the fact that pretty much every single photo has a massive photo bucket watermark. A majority of the threads are just left with the text portion intact, and as you go further and further back, it only gets worse from there. So I was doing quite a bit of clicking and digging to find even something of note. The most jarring difference that I noticed from modern culture to what I saw in the forums was the overall lack of negativity. I am by no means a saint when it comes to being positive on the internet, but it was definitely a little bit refreshing reading through threads without a single negative comment. To be honest, I'm not totally sure why this is. Is it because the builds are overall less, to put it bluntly, stupid? No one was really trying to clout chase in this era, as there wasn't much, if any, clout to gain. Everyone seemed to build what they could and what they liked, rather than what others did. Also, since it was pretty tightly knit, there was no real elitism. People with more expensive builds didn't look down on people with stock cars, and no one really talked about the prices of things, which seems to be quite a focal point on social media, as everyone tries to outflex each other. I plan on making a video with this specific topic in mind, so I won't go too in depth, but I thought it was pretty noteworthy. But why did forums die? If they had so many positive qualities, what pushed everyone away? Well, there's one thing I neglected to mention. They didn't. Although I didn't notice at first, despite literally being on the front page, all the way at the bottom, they show peak viewership of the site. 3,845 members online. January 20th, 2020. To be honest, I was pretty shocked by this. I had assumed that almost everyone was gone from here years and years ago, but even as I'm recording this video today, there's over 200 viewers. If forums never died, who the fuck is on a 20-year-old Canadian Toyota forum? Well, as I mentioned before, there's quite a wealth of knowledge on this little site, despite there most likely being a few who just want to go on a neat little nostalgia trip. The use case of the forum has evolved. It might have started as a place to congregate, but its purpose has shifted, and now serves as an archive for a bygone period of time, and a useful resource for gathering information. So will we see a resurgence of forums as they once were? Probably not. Although it seems like a much better place to actually share information and talk to others than what we have today, it's simply not engaging enough for your average person nowadays. There's no app, and a forum isn't engineered to steal your attention like a modern social site. Most people will inevitably take the path of least resistance, and simply having to type a site name onto a browser is significantly more difficult than just opening an app on your phone. Chances may be slim, but our best hope is someone creating a similar format to a forum, but in a more modern style. Finally, are these forums worth going back and looking through? I would say so. Even if it's just for a quick little neat nostalgia trip, I'd recommend you give them a look. Although it may be a bit of a grind and a tad bit boring, cool pictures and good information is still out there. If you're someone that used to browse DK in the past, please let me know what it was actually like, as I'm curious to see how accurate my findings were. To end it off, thanks for watching.